The space race began in 1955 and ended in 1975. It was between the US and the Soviet Union, and it followed World War II. A brief overview is that it was a competition to be the first to land in space, whether it was on the moon or just to get there. Both countries competed to have the best technology that could get them into space, and they both took German engineers to have them on their side. America used engineer Wernher von Braun to lead the US program, and the Soviets captured Sergei Korolev for their program. The first satellite that was launched into space was in 1957, and it was by the Soviet Union. It was the first satellite in orbit, and happened on October 4th, and the name of this orbit was Sputnik 1. Pictured is a similar um, satellite that could be found, and basically all it does is just orbit the Earth and capture images and data that will then be sent back to the Soviet Union. The first man in space occurred in 1961 in April, and it was also by the Soviet Union. They were the first to put a man in space and have him orbit the Earth. This man was Yuri Gagarin. He was upon the spacecraft Vostok 1. Unfortunately, he had a hard time getting back into his capsule, but everything went well. He orbited the Earth once before re-entering the atmosphere. There were two sections of the capsule, but they got intertwined when returning to the Earth. Thankfully, the heat allowed it to break apart and send him back to Earth safely. He had to parachute down when he got close enough, but this made him a hero in many countries and made him receive many honors. The first man on the moon was in 1969, and this was accomplished by the United States, which was their first major accomplishment, but it was the most important because the goal of the space race was to put somebody on the moon. This was accomplished by Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. Previously, in 1961, John F. Kennedy, the president, promised that the United States would be the first to put men on the moon in a speech to Congress. Fortunately, all of this was accomplished, and it was able to be successful. There was also a first American spacewalk that took place by Edward White. This was shortly after the Soviet Union, and although this was not on the moon, it was a spacewalk that he was able to do. It happened in 1965, and he was just attached by a rope that allowed him to go out into the atmosphere and go the um, through the atmosphere and do everything that the Soviet Union was doing, but he was unfortunately shortly after the Soviet Union. So in all, this was just a big competition that was fueled by World War II that competed between the United States and the Soviet Union to be the first and the best in relation to space. And walking on the moon, getting someone to the moon, and being able to receive data and use technology in it. So for an assessment before the next class, what would need to be done is just a 3-2-1. So just bring in 3 things that were learned, 2 things that you are still interested in or want to learn more about, and 1 thing that you still wonder.